doing, mate?
Living the dream, Rob. What are you trying to put me to sleep with that music? What happened to all the fun?
It's the gentle news intro, and I thought I'd go a little bit gentle since the world's about to end in a nuclear holocaust. I hope you're prepared, mate.
No, we got to sound the alarm. We got to get people perked up. We need an attention grabber.
Absolutely. Well, folks, if you're just waking up to the news of the day and you're tuning into the Unspoken Truth, thanks very much for your loyalty. It's great to have you here. We're excited to be bringing you the headlines of the day and showing you what's going on in the world. And we're going to pull the curtain back behind what's really going on in mainstream media and the story behind the story. And we have politicians lying to our faces. First thing when I wake up in the morning, I shouldn't expect anything less. And then another politician inciting absolute violence and destruction, yet still allowed to actually be in social media. If I went out there inciting violence and destruction of all types of things, I would be cancelled pretty much instantaneously. But
I'd turn you off.
That's it. You've been tossed out, man. But since the deep state kind of running everything, what can we do? All we can do is just accept life for what it is and make the most of what we got. Let's get into today's show, shall we? So we've got a series of things going on in the world. If you haven't already heard, folks, the Kremlin was attacked overnight. So the Kremlin is like the parliament of Russia, if you don't know, and they were attacked by a drone overnight. And is this the red line that the Russians have been threatening about? I'm going to investigate that. Ed's going to do some reading of the tea leaves, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about commodities. And when I was building the graphic for this, I asked him, what is the commodity? And he said, well, that's the surprise, Rob. You've got to tune in and watch. So let's have a look at these tea leaves and see exactly what's happening and what the commodities are telling us. If you don't know, Tucker Carlson was offered $100 million by Patrick Bet-David yesterday. We're going to talk about that. And who is on the list to be crossed out as the next bank to fail? I'm not entirely sure. I'm not that close to it, but I know Ed is, and he's going to take us through that and give us some information there as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's happened. Make sure, folks, you're living by the mantra of the unspoken truth here. Reduce your exposure to the bank, get some gold and silver, and build some passive recurring income. And if you need some help with that, Ed can definitely help you as well. Folks, if you're not following us over on Spotify, please pop on over to Spotify and subscribe to the podcast there. If you can't see us on YouTube for whatever reason, because of your commute, you're driving, something else is stopping you, can always have us in your ears in the audio-only version of the show over on Spotify. And we're over on Telegram as well, and also on Rumble. And don't forget to follow along on Twitter. Add us into your feed there, and you'll see a couple of tweets per day coming out. And make sure mostly you come on over to Telegram, because I'm starting to post a few things in there that you won't see in mainstream media. And it's going to get pretty spicy in there in the next couple of weeks. So I'm very careful about what I am posting in there, because I seem like I'm self-censoring a bit. I don't mean to be self-censoring, but I'm also acutely aware that I'm completely desensitized to the death and destruction of the world. And, I was thinking about something earlier today, Ed, and I don't know, just give us your feedback on this, mate, and tell me what your thoughts are, because I was thinking that as I scroll through my Telegram and I look at everything that's going on there, man, I think I see more dead people inside of my Telegram feed in 20 minutes of looking at it than somebody 30 years ago would ever possibly see in 10 lifetimes. And that's because we're looking at a war, and war is an absolute destruction of people, property, and life as you know it. It's complete and total devastation and destruction. And it's amazing what you get kind of used to as a human being. And I'm not saying it's a good thing that you get used to it, but you better bloody get used to it, because it's coming to a neighborhood near you sooner rather than later. I've been sounding that alarm for a little while now, and I think it might be coming home to roost. And we got a story that talks about that today. What do you think, Ed?
Well, that's scary. Now, I'm not on Telegram. I mean, I've got it, but I never use it. I've got to start using. Now that you have us on Telegram, now I got to.
I've got to get you posting in there. Just come on over to that channel and post in there.
I'm a simple guy. I grew up, with cassette players.
So I'm trying to spike some outrage in you by posting in there. Like, this is outrageous.
Okay. Okay. So. I will start participating more in Telegram. So I have not seen those images that you're talking about yet, although I take your word for it that they are out there, which is kind of amazing that there is a platform where you can see those kind of images. Now, showing bodies, in a public way does have some precedence. That was largely attributed to the Vietnam War being drawn down. When Walter Cronkite started showing the bodies of dead soldiers in Vietnam, that kind of accelerated our departure from Vietnam. So, but outside of that, you don't see dead bodies. I mean, short of going to a funeral, the average American anyway is not going to see a dead body.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me what you think of this, because you have to be on one side, or maybe you don't. I was watching a YouTuber the other day. He's an Estonian guy. His name's Arthur, or Arta, with no TH, something ARTUR. So he's a really good dude. He was so in the Estonian military, they have conscription. So he was conscripted as an infantry guy for, I think, 6 months. He's got this really big personality. He's a big dude. Like, he's 6'4". He's like a really happy guy, and he kind of makes fun of Putin and just the way that he does his analysis on the war. And he's actually raised a bit of money and bought some vehicles for the Ukrainian military. I don't know why people are doing that when there's gazillions of dollars going forward to that country, but people are still raising money and passing equipment across. It just shows you how corrupt it actually is, right? If individuals have to do that and individuals have to contribute to it and governments can't actually sustain it, just shows me the corruption right there in plain sight. Anyway, he's trying to do the right thing. But one of the things that he says is that, countries cannot invade each other in this day and age. And countries should always respect each other's sovereignty. It doesn't matter what time in history that you are. But historically, when you look back at the world, countries would invade each other because of resources. And I didn't have that resource at home, so I went abroad and I either collected it on the high seas or I invaded another country to get it. And if there's historic precedents in the 20th century, right? You look at the Japanese who invaded China, and so many reasons for countries to actually do that. And he says, in this day and age, you can't do that. We don't need to do that anymore. In fact, that's what the United Nations was set up to do, to stop all of that, so we can talk to each other. And we're so intertwined economically that won't happen again. But he says, Arta says, that you need to pick a side. If you're trying to remain neutral in this conflict in Ukraine, I'm trying to remain neutral, and here I am in Sydney, Australia, a gazillion miles away on the other side of planet Earth. It actually has zero impact on my life. So can I remain neutral? Because if I'm remaining neutral, then I'm kind of just shrugging my shoulders and saying, oh, well, if the Russians want to go into Bakhmut and kill 20,000 Ukrainian soldiers, whatever, man, what do I care? Or if I'm on the Ukrainian side and I'm like, no, you should fight, you should dig in and you should hold the ground and you should fight back and you shouldn't let the Russians do that, then I seem like a warmonger. But if I'm on the Russian side going, well, there's been a border dispute there for the last 500 years. The borders have changed back and forth several times in the last century, for heaven's sake, with Crimea, with Lviv, so many different places, and there's a large percentage of the people. The president of Ukraine, for heaven's sake, is a native Russian speaker and lived in Russia, for heaven's sake. We all seem to forget all of those things, so. But what do you do? What's your stance? Do you stay in the middle and play both sides, or do you pick one side?
No. I definitely have opinions, but I try to approach every kind of war. The yardstick I use to measure it is whether it's a quote just war or not. Are they doing it? What are the reasons? What's the motivation? What's the reason for doing this? Now it gets complicated when you consider that I'm sitting here in America. And we're all of 250, 280 years old. Russia and Ukraine, they've got churches that are 4 times older than America is. You
go into the cellar down in the Kremlin, and the cellar is like older than. Yeah, exactly.
That's right. And when you consider, historically, Kyiv, which is the capital of Ukraine, was the original capital of Russia. Mm. So Russia has they've got an ancient history with that part of the world. And look, pretty much every Ukrainian, and Ukrainian is its own language. But if you speak Ukrainian and you're talking to a Russian, you're going to understand them. They're that close, in language. But all of your Ukrainians who live in like Odessa and Donetsk and in the Donbass, they all speak Russian. So there is that strong cultural connection, to Russia. So so I try to imagine, well, what if somebody wanted to take over, California? Actually, you can have California. What if somebody wanted to take over Iowa? Something like that. And I think we need to try to put ourselves in the shoes of the other side as best as we can. Not that would justify whatever they're doing, but I think it does I think context is really important. And, if I were Putin, and if I tried to get into that mind of his, and I probably have to take a shower after I got out of it, but if I got into that rat's nest of his and try to see things from his perspective, he's always seen Ukraine as a buffer, right, between NATO and Ukraine, right? I mean, between NATO and Russia, right? Now, remember that when the Cold War was ending, and James Baker was sent over to Russia to finalize the details about the unwinding of the Soviet Union. Gorbachev's big deal was, listen, we're worried about NATO. And Baker assured him, we're not going to expand anywhere near Russia. We're happy where we are. We're not going to go beyond our borders. And then 8 years later, they hold a summit in, where was it? I want to say, I'm not going to remember where
Minsk.
it was. Thank you.
It was in Minsk in Belarus.
Yeah, and what was on the what was one of the points of discussion is whether or not to allow Georgia into NATO. And now Georgia is on the freaking border of Russia. And so here, Putin sees us promising that we weren't going to expand NATO any closer to the Russian borders. And now, 8 years later, we actually put Georgia on the agenda about whether or not to include them in NATO. So I can see why he might be a little suspicious that we might not honor our words, and he probably would like to still have a buffer between him and NATO. The question is, all right, so if he does take over Ukraine, all right, bam, he's on the border with NATO now. He just eliminated that, quote, buffer. So that's why I was kind of surmising maybe he's willing to negotiate. All right, just give us, Kyiv and everything east of the Dnieper River, and we'll just keep everything else as a buffer. Maybe he'll settle for something like that. Who knows? But look, he took over Crimea, and I think that was just a flat out grab. He just wanted Crimea, and he took it. He saw weakness in the powers to be. He knew that the Obama administration wasn't going to do anything about it, so he just grabbed it. He just took it, and so I'm willing to be convinced. I'm willing to be open-minded on this. I am not actually, because personally, I don't think America should be involved in this, because
what do you think about Robert F. Kennedy coming out and saying, if I was the president of the United States, I'd close all of the military bases and bring everybody home?
Okay, that is a bridge too far for me to coin a phrase. Okay, that's.
I think he's failing to understand that the whole reason that we have the world order that we have and peace and security that we have, and it's only from time to time that we have these types of conflicts. I mean, we haven't seen a conflict of this scale since World War II. So it's been 70 or 80 years since we've seen something like that. And it's largely in part because of the U.S. Navy.
Yeah.
U.S. Navy keeps peace on the high seas and stops all the piracy from going on. And that's what stops the world descending into complete and total chaos.
Listen, as dangerous as the world is, it would be by multiple scales more dangerous if we weren't out there. If we didn't have these bases around the world. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. Just imagine how emboldened China would be if we didn't have all of those bases. We have a lot of bases in the Pacific.
It's like 800 or something, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot. So imagine how emboldened some of the people are pretty bad people. And America does not start wars in order to take over countries. We don't. We just don't do it. People will say that we do, but we don't. There's no evidence, of that. So we're pretty magnanimous that way. We're willing to do. So I think that the U.S. military around the world is a stabilizing force in the world, and that's just, if we started pulling now. It does kind of grind my gears a little bit when we spend all this money on bases in freaking Germany, wealthy countries, and they don't pay for any of the expense. one of the reasons why Germany is so prosperous is because they didn't have to spend any money on their defense.
So I've been investigating that in the last day because there was like a Senate estimates your version of that in America, and they had all of your military there. I was going to make a couple of videos on that today, actually, and they're talking about readiness. They're talking about readiness for the Marines and their expeditionary force. And, you know, they're the 911 call that the world makes. If something goes wrong, those Marines can go. There's 31 landing craft. They've got combined arms ability to actually seize and hold ground and to repel attack and to do what they need to do. And they can do that for an extended period of time until the follow-on forces catch up and do what they need to do. And the readiness that they have there is like slipping away. And the unspoken truth is the US military seems to be in a state of decline. Yeah. And it's in a state of decline for a variety of different reasons. And the only thing holding it together is the people and the people that are in that job. But, you know, it's such a thankless job when you think about, when you go all the way down to something like the airman level who are working on F-15C models that are 45 years old. They're as old as me. And those aircraft, you know, for every hour they fly, they require 25 hours or 30 hours worth of maintenance for every hour that they fly. And they fly 50 hours a month. And, you know, the thing that's stopping them flying is the ability for the maintainers to keep the engineering going, to keep that happening. And when you look at the decline and what's happening to the US military, it is like unbelievable. And it's scary. And the Chinese are watching the same thing as what I'm watching. The Russians are watching it too, going, all right, let's go. Look at that. They're in a shit state. Let's do something about it.
Yeah, the U.S. military these days is more of a social experiment than it is a fighting force. You know,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm drawn into that. That's a good media story.
The military has always been very inefficient with their finances, right? If they had good bookkeepers, they could, because we throw a lot of money at the military. It's what, a third of our budget? You know, we throw a lot of money at the military, and we know that the vast majority of it is wasted.
Okay. It's not a third of your budget. That's the GDP. That's something like 3 to 4% of the US budget.
Okay, but it's a lot. Okay,
it's a lot. It's absolutely huge.
Their budgets are never cut. They're always increased.
Adjusted for inflation.
Right, and the only question is they call it a cut when they say, okay, we're only going to increase it by 3% instead of 5%. They call that a cut. No, you're still increasing it. Look, I believe we should have a strong military, and I think we should fund it. We have the best in the world. We have a lot of prestige. A lot of our power is I mean, you can argue that the prosperity of America is largely thanks to our military. You know,
I would extend that and say the prosperity of the Western world is largely because of the US Navy and keeping peace and security on the high seas. Folks, I want to shift gears, and I'm glad that we kind of kicked off the show with this discussion and getting Ed's opinion as well, because there's been a huge development overnight, at least in my time, and during your day, it's actually happened, and it's over nighttime in Russia. So I've just got this video here that I'll play for you. I can't play the entire video because of the policy on YouTube, but if you pop over onto Telegram, you can see the whole video, and there's a couple of different angles of it, but I'm just going to show you this video. So the Kremlin was attacked. And as I mentioned, you know, you can see the Kremlin is like the parliament building of Russia, right? So that's where everything is going on. That's where the decisions are made. And if you look in the foreground here, you can see the seats that they're getting ready for the May Day parade on May the 9th in 5 days' time. They have their annual parade to celebrate the liberation of, or really the liberation of Europe from Nazi Germany. So they're getting all set up for that, and this is showing you what's going to happen. So I'll play the video, but the video kind of stops when YouTube would censor it. So I cut that bit out so YouTube doesn't censor it. So you can see the drone going in there, and it goes off right there, like literally a nanosecond later is where I cut that video. So I'll just play that again in case you missed it, so you can see it. And boom, there it is. So, you know, I look at that. It's kind of funny when you see the actual full footage. It looks like it bounces off the roof. And there was some footage. I saw some footage the other day of some Russian drones on the battlefield trying to attack some German anti-aircraft systems. And the drone previously has been quite effective against Ukrainian and allied vehicles. There's lots of footage of that. They're called all-on drones, and they come on in. And they're not all-on drones. They're a loitering munition. A funny looking thing. It's got looks like a crisscross sort of thing. I can't remember the exact name of it. I'll think of that and I'll share it with you. But they've been quite effective at destroying vehicles, destroying artillery pieces, and used against troops in the open as well. And this anti-aircraft system is the ideal system to engage with these drones because it can see them and it shoots them down with, not with missiles, but with bullets and rounds. And the drone comes in and it literally bounces off the thing, and like the armor protects it and just bounces off. And it's like, oh, well, that's good. Your drone's not going to work against that stuff. So, the armor that we have that asymmetric capability against them. And when you look at this drone attacking the building, you'll see the full footage of it when you look on Telegram, and folks, just have a look at the link down below in the description and you'll be able to see that like in 2 seconds. You'll see it and you go, that was really ineffective. It looked like it bounced off the building as well. But there's some subsequent footage that goes on a little bit later that shows you the building on fire. And for some reason, I just had this song in my head. Remember the roof is on fire. I saw that, and I'm like, the roof was on fire in the Kremlin, and I don't, trying to make light of it and say that it's funny. There's a couple of things that have happened as a result of that. So Zelensky is over in Finland, and he came out publicly and stated that it wasn't them, and they didn't actually do it. And I got a little screen grab of something that I saw in one of my socials here. So this idiot here, Dmitry Medvedev, came out and said after today's terrorist attack, he called it a terrorist attack. Meanwhile, they fired like literally hundreds of missiles in the last couple of months at civilian targets, and they're calling this drone thing a terrorist attack. After today's terrorist attack, there are no options left except for the physical elimination of Zelensky. He is not needed even to sign an act of unconditional surrender.
Wow.
Hitler, as you know, didn't sign either. So just read between the lines of what he's saying, right? There are no options left except for the physical elimination of Zelensky. Imagine if I came out and said there's no options left for that. I would be cancelled instantly. He's not even needed to sign the act of unconditional surrender. So that's the expectation that these Russians have, is that there's going to be an unconditional surrender. So my view is that in the military, I just know from being an infantry guy, right? In an Australian infantry battalion, there's a couple of different companies. In the battalion that I was in, there's Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie company, just infantry guys, and there's 3 platoons. Three platoons within each company, and then there's 3 sections within each platoon. But then we also have heavy weapons, and mortars, and then we have recon. And when you look at the makeup of modern Western military forces and the way that they work, what we're going to do first is probe and see what the reaction will be. And if the reaction is not very much, then we're going to act and have a proper go. Because if we know that we can get inside the Russian integrated air defense systems with our fiberglass drone and 10 kilos worth of explosives, then maybe all we need to do is send like 50 of those all at once. Some of them are going to get chewed up, but if we send 50 of them, chances are we'll probably get 20 or 30 in, and that will actually do some damage and cause some problems for them. But I also think that it's a gross miscalculation that you think that the Russians are not going to respond to something like that. I think what we're going to see is an escalation on the scale of something that we've never really thought of before. And when you look at the way the Russians have been attacking with their missile systems, their drones, and their air force, they haven't really gone after, as far as we can tell from mainstream media, they haven't really gone after the centers of gravity. They haven't really attacked Kyiv or tried to take Zelensky out, because eventually they want to take that ground and they don't want to destroy that infrastructure that's there. They're more than happy to destroy the ground around it because it means nothing to them, because they can go and rebuild it. But taking the city down and taking the centers of gravity down like that, they haven't seemed to have done that. They have attacked for sure. There's no doubt about that. And they have tried to do that, no doubt about it, but they haven't been successful. So maybe they're going to take the gloves off, and this is going to escalate to something that we haven't seen before. And if the number 2 person in Russia is now calling for the elimination of the number 1 person in Ukraine, which they haven't called for before, they're looking for some sort of negotiated peace where the Ukrainians surrender their ground and give up what they want to give up. But the Ukrainians are like, we're never giving up anything. You have to leave and give us all the ground back. I just wonder where this is actually going. And it's starting to feel like it's a massive escalation. And the problem that we face, tell me what you think here, Ed, is that we're looking at this thing from a day-to-day perspective. But the Russians are not looking day-to-day, man. They're looking like 20 years down the track, maybe 50 years down the track. If we own the ground here in 50 years' time, where will our country be? Because the leaders of a country are not thinking about what's happening next week. They're thinking about what's happening in 5 years' time. And that's the difference between a dictatorship and an autocracy like in Russia than what we have here, where our politicians are only interested in the next news cycle. So I think that this is a much longer game than what any of us here in the West can anticipate. And I also think that Tucker Carlson has something to do with all of this, and his removal from all of that has, in large part, something to do with it. You know, in a cursory look of a bunch of pro-Ukrainian channels on YouTube, you can see that many of those channels have literally millions of views per video. But people like me and you don't get a lot of views on our videos because we're not pro-Ukrainian, we're not pro-Russian, we're not pro anything. We're just kind of giving our perspective on something. So the algorithm's not really favoring what it is that we're doing. And remember, the algorithm on YouTube is so sophisticated. It's not using the titles and the descriptions and the thumbnails and all of that. That gets a person to click. What it's doing to rank my video and to decide whether my video gets shown to people is it's listening to my voice and my words, and it's using all of the AI in the background to figure out what this video is actually about. And so if my video is not pro-Ukrainian and it's pro-Russian, or it's not saying what the narrative is trying to perpetuate, then I'm not being shown as much. And I see that in YouTube Shorts. When I look at the analytics of YouTube Shorts, I see this massive hockey stick where YouTube goes, what's that video about? Not sure, see if people like it. I'll show it. Gets 1,000 views in like literally an hour, and then it stops completely. And then I look at some of the other videos on my other channels, which have nothing to do with war or combat or narratives or mainstream media, and they have a steady gradient and climb, and they have 6,000 or 7,000 views per day. And every day they have more and more views. So it's got everything to do with whether or not I'm perpetuating the narratives that they want, or whether or not I'm speaking the unspoken truth. And if I take a leaf out of Tucker Carlson's book, you know, he did an interview with his mate Clayton on Redacted a couple of weeks ago before he was canned. And he made a decision. He goes, I made a decision 20 years ago that I was just going to tell the truth. And I was wrong about the Iraq war. And I came out and said I was wrong. I was wrong about so many things. And he said, instead of telling a lie to try and cover it up, I just came out and told the truth. I was wrong. That was wrong. I should never have said that. And he said, there's something really empowering about telling the truth. And when you tell a lie to cover up the truth, then you're disempowering yourself more and more. And I thought to myself, when we created this channel, we need to say something about truth and say something about just telling the truth. And it doesn't matter about algorithms. It doesn't matter about views. It doesn't matter about anything. If I want to leave a legacy in the world, I want to leave a legacy of truth. And if I'm wrong, I'll put my hand up and say I'm wrong. And if it's not right, or if I become an instrument of the deep state without realizing, I'll put my hand up and go, whoa, I'm an instrument of the deep state. So you've got to be really careful, folks, of what you're looking at. You know, is that video of the drone flying into the Kremlin building actually even a Ukrainian drone? Well, according to Zelensky, no. So are there partisans in Russia or Russian opposition that are wanting to actually wreak havoc and escalate this conflict, but they're too stupid to realize the international ramifications of it? Maybe, possibly. Or is it a false flag altogether? The unspoken truth is we don't know. But unless you're asking yourself these questions and you look at the other side of it, so Medvedev is saying, yeah, it's Ukrainians. The Ukrainians say, no, it's not us. And Zelensky came out and said, we're not attacking Russians in Russia. So I started the show by saying politicians lying to each other and lying to us openly, and us going, oh, yeah, whatever. If I come out here on YouTube and tell a lie and go against the narrative, I'll be cancelled. And my content will be demonetized, and it potentially will be taken down, and I'll get a strike on the YouTube channel. But the reality is Zelensky comes out and goes, we're not attacking Russia on its territory. We're fighting Russia on our own lands. That's the quote that he says. And he only said that a couple of hours ago, yet they've been attacking in Russian targets for the last 12 to 18 months, however long this conflict's been going, since February last year. And they have been attacking Russia. And he said that they haven't been attacking Russia, but they have been. They've attacked Belgrade. They've attacked across the border. They've attacked apparently the territory of Russia as it relates to where Russia has drawn their borders and said that that's a red line as well. So, I don't know what to believe. And then on top of all of that, as I was looking, I came across another video in my Telegram channel. And once again, I can't show you this video, but I can tell you these Ukrainians put out a video of a T-90 tank being attacked. So a T-90 tank, a Russian T-90, is the top of the line equipment, same as an M1 Abrams, right? Same equivalent. And you see the tank from the drone footage from above. It's kind of facing down to the bottom of your screen and it's firing. And then it turns around and it drives away with its turret facing this way. And it's really easy to disseminate that this is a fake Ukrainian video. This is propaganda. So they put propaganda out there saying, look, we destroyed a T-90 tank with a Javelin missile. And when you watch it, you see the T-90 from above and it's a bright sunny day. You can see the shadows. And then it cuts, the tank drives away. And straight away, you see that it's a different tank. And then straight away, you see that it might be a completely different day or the clouds have completely covered the sun because all the shadows have gone away. And a T-90 is a really distinctive vehicle. If you know what you're looking at, you know exactly what to see, right? And then it cuts again and it goes, the tank is facing the other way, but the video has been reversed. And when it gets hit by the missile, you can clearly see it's a T-72. Because at 1 minute, less than 1 minute ago, like 20 seconds ago, I could see the mudguards of the front of the actual T-90 tank there. And then 30 seconds later into the video, as it's driving away, about to get hit by the missile, I see it's actually coming towards me, but they're reversing the video, backing it up. No mudguards on the front, gets hit by a missile, gets clocked. Oh, T-90 is a piece of garbage, it doesn't work on the battlefield. And I'm like, the unspoken truth is that the Ukrainians are very sophisticated at their propaganda. And because this video goes for such a short space of time, I literally see it for 30 seconds. I see the T-90 and I go, oh man, wow, they've got them in the battlefield now. What's happening? What's going on? And they pretend to show you a video of the thing being destroyed on the battlefield, but it hasn't been. It's a lie. The politicians are lying to you. They're lying to you about the war. They're lying to you about not attacking Russia, and they're continuing to perpetuate this lie. And I just asked the question, who is it that stands to gain the most out of this? Who is it? The defense contracting companies, the deep state, the World Economic Forum, the IMF. Who is it that stands to gain the most money out of this? Because whoever that is, that group of people, whomever they are, they're the ones perpetuating this conflict, edging us closer to the abyss, edging us closer to a nuclear exchange. And there's when an attack happens in Moscow, for heaven's sake, like happened today, you're pushing the timeline of a solution to this out another 12 months at least. This is not going away for at least another 12 months. And the counterattack that's about to happen, man, I hope that that's successful. I really do. I hope that that's successful. But because I fear it's just the last roll of the dice. And then we're in uncharted waters. Can't hold them back any longer. NATO's not going to support you forever. America's not going to support you forever. Man, oh man. Scary stuff. What do you think, Ed?
Yeah, modern social media must be a propagandist, wet dream, right? So much opportunity to spread whatever message you want to spread, because once it's out there, that your side will take the ball and run with it. I wouldn't be at all surprised if some of those videos end up on CNN and just sanitized just enough to make it past the censors, right? Because it'll support, their narrative. They'll go on Telegram, they'll find the images that they want to support, their narrative.
But unless you know what you're looking at, like me, unless you're a equipment nerd like me, that I know aircraft, I know tanks, I know weapon systems. It's just where I grew up, right? And I've been looking at that stuff since I was a child, for heaven's sake. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but that's the reality of it. That's what I've been looking at and playing with those weapon systems in real life as well. But if you're just a normal, regular journalist, or, you've been assigned the portfolio of military or being the analyst to analyze the analyst, you wouldn't pick up on it.
Well, that's why they always have their guest analyst to explain it to you.
So I saw, be super careful of that as well. There's this guy out there. His name's Colonel Douglas McGregor. So he was a colonel in the U.S. Army. You would have seen this guy before. He does the rounds, and he's doing the rounds saying that the Russians are kicking the asses of the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are dying at scale, and the whole thing is a lie. And a lot of what he says is true. You can believe it. But I also think a lot of what he says is just conjecture and opinion. And he rubs me the wrong way all the time because there's no possible way this military analyst, and there's no question about his credentials, could know what he says. And so I spent 10 minutes yesterday debunking him. And I posted the debunking in a bunch of videos that he was on saying, watch out, don't believe what this guy is telling you. He's a liar. So he's a colonel from the American army, but he's out there in mainstream media lying to the general public. And one of the things that he says is, oh, there's an attack on an oil refinery in Crimea. What a load of garbage. That won't make any difference. They hit one tank was on fire. So what? But the reality is, he says they were not using that fuel for anything anyway. But how could you know that? How could you know that unless you worked at the pumping station of that oil refinery and knew where that fuel was going? He doesn't know the infrastructure of Crimea or where the pipes go or where the end point of that fuel is. Does it go to the airport? Maybe. Is it aviation fuel? Is it diesel fuel for the ships in the harbor there? Is it diesel fuel for the trucks? And does it go just to the petrol station for regular consumers? There's no possible way that he could know that. But he says with absolute 100% certainty that that would have zero impact on the battlefield. And then to perpetuate the lie that he says, he goes, oh, they attacked the oil refinery, but they hit one tank and one tank was on fire. And I found this is what I spent 10 minutes doing. In 10 minutes, I found the before and after picture. And there's more than 9 tanks that have been destroyed and the oil refinery is completely shut down. So you would be forgiven for thinking that Colonel Douglas McGregor knew what he was talking about, but he's just looking in a Telegram channel the same as me, drawing a conclusion, right, saying this is bullshit. Yeah. And I'm saying, no, it's not. It's not true. You're out there perpetuating a lie that you don't know, and you're leveraging credentials that you've got from the military. It's like, no, man, anybody with like eyes and a brain can see that you're full of shit. And now that I've caught you in a lie, I don't believe anything that you say, because everything that you say has no credibility at all. And then I found myself like getting upset about this propaganda war. And I'm like, Rob, you just got to detach yourself from this shit, like, it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
You know, when we look at this war from a 30,000-foot level, you know, bigger picture, you know, so what does it mean to us? What would it mean if Russia took over Ukraine? What
Nothing.
would it mean? What's okay?
Killing would stop.
What does it mean? Now, of course, the proponents of the war, you know, the defenders of Ukraine will say, "Oh, it's all in the name of democracy. We have to defend democracy. We have to keep Ukraine out of the oppressive hands of the evil Russia." Now, that's the narrative, right, from people who support the war. Well, people easily forget, maybe they never even knew, but Ukraine is probably the most corrupt country in Europe. So you want to talk about democracy? You know, there wasn't really a democracy beforehand. So I don't know which democracy you think you're defending. And when this is all over, do you think that they're going to be adopting an American-style constitution? So what exactly is it?
They tried that in Iraq, man. It didn't work.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Ask what's his name? Who was that name? Paul. What's his name?
Paul Bremer.
Paul Bremer, who's trying to impose our democracy on Iran.
Can't change like 50,000 years of human history in like one decade. What an idiot. Right.
Yeah. You know, so I don't buy that argument that we are doing this in defense of democracy. So personally, I feel whenever I hear somebody use that argument on TV, I kind of yawn and move on to the next channel. And usually that is pretty much the only case that the proponents of the war have, is that this is in defense of democracy. That's it. But I
think the Ukrainians would go a step further and say that they want to take their land back. And I kind of understand that as well.
Sure,
you know,
I can understand that. Sure, yeah. I understand. But there are a lot of countries out there who lost land who would like to get it back. You know, look at China and Taiwan, by the way. There are a lot of countries out there who would like to get their old territory back. So are we going to get involved in every dispute every time? I mean, so are we going to tell me which borders are we going to defend? From which date? Pick a day. Please, just pick a map and we'll defend it forever. Because those borders are immutable. They can never be changed. And if anyone tries to change them, we are going to war.
Listen, mate, you're going to get us censored on YouTube for solving the world's problems. I'm going to have to cut it there and segue. You've got a nice little topic that I'm interested to hear about. You want to go and read the tea leaves of commodities. What have you got for us today, mate?
Okay, so there are a few things out there that are really good indicators of what's coming. Now, remember, the markets in general are discounting mechanisms. They always look down the road. They never act on the data that's current. They're always trying to anticipate what's coming, because these Wall Street types, they want to be in first, right? So they're always anticipating events. So that's where we get this phrase. You probably heard it. Buy the rumor, sell the news, right? That's why many times when a good piece of news comes out from a company, the stock actually sells off. And the average person, well, what happened? It was good news. The stock should be going up. Well, that's because a lot of people, the street was anticipating that news, and they got in before. So when the news was out, that news was old news to them. Might be new news to you, but it was old news to them. Well, there are some indicators that are more important than others. And the indicator that I'm going to show you right now is a really strong indicator about what you can expect to happen in our economy, not just in America, but the global economy. And that is, drum roll, please, oil. There it is, Rob. Now you can scratch that itch, oil. And I want to show you what's been happening to oil over the past just few days. In the past 3 days alone, oil has gone from about $77 a barrel down to $69 a barrel. It was down to $68. So for oil, that is a very dramatic move in just a matter of a few days. I can tell you how you don't know what it takes to move oil. Okay, it's a big deal. You need big macro events to move the price of oil in a substantive way. Now, the reason why this is so important is oil kind of is a very good indicator of what the street expects the economy to look like a little bit down the road. Because as the economy, as you can imagine, it's common sense, right? As the economy is strong and the demand is up, right? People are out there, they're spending money. People they're going on trips, they're spending money. Manufacturing is up, so productivity is up. Times are good, so those factories are, they're purring along, so they're using oil. So when there's increased economic activity, there's more demand for oil. Therefore, the price of oil goes up. In periods of weak economic activity, the price of oil goes down because there's less need for oil. So remember, when you're thinking about the markets, you got to learn to look at things through a certain lens. You can't look at them the way the average person looks at them. You got to look at them the way the way Wall Street looks at them. You want to say, well, which means you got to turn it to the left a little bit. Look at it a little skewed. Say, well, what is the story behind this? Because every big move in a stock, in the market, in a commodity, it has a story behind it. Okay, so we're always trying to extrapolate that story. And in this case, since oil is such a good indicator of upcoming economic conditions, that's why I look at oil a lot to help me determine, is there a recession coming or what? So this is one more very strong argument that a recession is coming. Well, listen, a recession is here, guys. I hate to break it to you. It's been here for a while. These government numbers are rigged. Before anybody does any kind of grocery shopping, we have been in a recession for a while. But officially, we haven't hit that recession level. But if you look at the price of oil as an example, that's another big red flag that the economy is going to be slowing down. Economic activity will be slowing down. Therefore, the need for oil will be slowing down. About 6 weeks ago, there's big news out of Saudi Arabia that they decided that OPEC Plus decided to cut their oil production. And of course, everyone's saying, oh, they're doing this to stick this to America. Now, their argument was, well, we're doing this as a safety valve in the event that the economy is slowed down. Well, it looks like they're kind of right. So their measures were actually kind of prudent. So watching oil here, I think there's one more big clue that recession is going to be looming really large in our lives. The cost of living is going to be going up pretty dramatically. And again, another reason to get your house in order, get your financial house in order. So, Rob, what do you think? Does that make sense, or am I completely blowing smoke?
No, your analysis is bang on, and I see why you would be looking to something like that. But we've seen massive manipulation of oil prices in the last 12 months as well, and we've seen the Russian price cap at $60 a barrel as well, trying to bleed the Russians dry, but they've got an unlimited supply of that, so it really doesn't do anything. But I want to share a little a funny meme I came across yesterday with you that really kind of typifies and explains exactly what's going on with the Russian oil sanctions. And if you're not across all of this, I promise you in less than 2 seconds, you'll understand. If you're listening on Spotify, I'll explain it. So here's the meme.
Yeah.
The Russians are selling. So if you're just listening, you're not watching. The Russians are selling the oil to India, and India are refining it into fuel, who sell it to Europe. So that's how, that's a funny meme, right? And the picture, if you're only listening, is a lady's holding a coconut with a straw in it, and she's got the straw in her mouth, and there's a boy next to her with a straw in her mouth. And the Russian oil is the coconut, the woman is India, and Europe is the dude sucking the oil out of the girl's mouth there. It's like, that really explains exactly what's going on here on planet Earth. And the sanctions, the oil sanctions that we have against these Russians stopping this, is that it's just fake. It's not real. That's the unspoken truth right there in that meme. That's the unspoken truth. It's almost the only way that you could go out there and say it without being canceled on social media or canceled on some platform or another, because you're not actually perpetuating the deep state narrative that these sanctions are biting them hard. It's really hurting them. It's like, yeah, it might be biting them hard. It's really hurting them. But there's also ways to circumvent that. There was a congressional hearing a couple of months ago where they were talking about how we were supplying goods to Iran and Iran was supplying goods to Russia. So we were indirectly funding the war with Russia. So we're sending gazillions of dollars over to Ukrainians to fight the Russians, but we're funding the Russians on that side. And that's exactly what's going on here, where the Indians are taking the oil from the Russians, and it's what we started out in the show saying, do you be on one side or the other? The Chinese are not on one side or the other. The Indians are not on one side or the other. They're in the middle going, oh, we just need to look out for ourselves. And in some ways, they're both right. And in some ways, they're both wrong as well, because they're perpetuating the conflict. And once again, it just comes down to looking at who stands to make the most from this. And if you look at oil in isolation, like you're kind of looking there for an indicator of what's coming, you will see that. But then when you take a step out, another 10,000 feet out, you come out from 50,000 feet, you go up to 60 or 70,000 feet and take that view, you'll see something else that will kind of like grind your gears a little bit and go, my analysis is not quite right there because I can't factor that stupid thing in there. But it is a deeply complicated subject, and it is a great leading indicator as well. I've always used that as a leading indicator of what's happening. So, I still drive around here. I have to fill my car up, and whatever I do, I'd never fill my car up in Cronulla because the prices are about 30% more expensive down here where I am, because we're right on the beach, and for some reason we have more money than everybody else. That's what the petrol companies think. So if I drive that away for 10 minutes, the price of petrol comes down by about 20 or 30%. It's quite significant. It's a big difference for me, at least. And I definitely notice that. But I don't notice it at the pump because I'm filling up my little Mini and it costs me $50. So instead of $50, it'll cost me $60 if I do it down here. But, for the sake of it, it's not much. But the point is, I'm still paying higher petrol prices today than I was pre-war. Why is that? And if I look back at your chart there, are the oil prices higher today than they were in February 2022? No, the same, about the same. So why is the price of petrol double what it was before the war? What's going on there?
Yeah, well, a part of it. Now that's a good point, because a lot of people think that there's a direct correlation between the price of oil and the gas they're taking out of the pump. Oh, oil just went up, so the gas is going up. Well, that's part of the reason, but there's more to it than that. Look, there are here in Minnesota, among all the other things we have to consider, we have to consider seasonality, because the petrol is different. The petrol mix is different in the summer than it is in the winter, and so there's that switchover, right? And then you got to wonder what kind of taxes did the legislature just put on the gas tap while you weren't looking. So that oil should be going. So that price should be coming down now. Well, not if they added those taxes that you weren't paying attention to. Well, those taxes are still there. Taxes never go away. Right. So so it is kind of a complicated. There's not a one-to-one correlation to the price of
But
oil.
this is the problem, Ed. You articulate that beautifully, right? By saying, and you sum it up by saying it's just more complicated than that. But the problem is, whenever somebody puts a microphone in front of a politician and goes, "Why are petrol prices so high?" They go, "Well, there's a war in Ukraine."
Oh,
but the oil prices are less than what they were a year ago. Like,
yeah.
What on earth are you talking about?
Well, these politicians, they're just looking for sound bites, and they expect everyone to swallow it. They're looking for
some reason, idiot journalists swallow it.
Yeah, oil prices and gas prices were spiking long before the war broke out in Ukraine.
And the price definitely went up. The oil price definitely went up.
Yes,
but then it's come all the way back down.
And we know why it went up. It's because Biden cut off the Keystone pipeline. We were, the day before Biden took office, America was energy independent for the first time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We weren't reliant on anyone else for oil. We were energy independent.
Why would you not want to continue that in your economy? Like, who would not want that?
The Green New Deal types. Oil is bad. Oil is evil.
Yes, it is. But why do you want to destroy the economy in the process?
Right. That's at any cost, right? At any cost. They're making us buy these electric vehicles. Forget the fact that these electric batteries have all sorts of toxic material in them that are not, biodegradable. Okay, and you can't, recycle those guys. The material goes into these batteries are freaking toxic. And plus the cost of one of those batteries is almost the cost of the car itself. It's so valuable. So they're not to mention the kill switches they can put in these things so that when the ESG kicks in, if you're not a good citizen, they can turn off your car, whenever they want.
You're missing one really important factor in that there. The slave labor that digs the cobalt out of the ground that actually
with their bare hands.
Their hands, exactly. And so these greenies are perpetuating slavery in the DRC.
And if you look at those mines, the damage they're doing to the earth is ungodly. But you'll never hear about. Oh yeah, one of these days I'm going to be doing a video in depth about that whole subject matter.
I think I mentioned it to you. I read a book recently called Cobalt Red.
Yeah,
that was the fellow who went over there and exposed it all and exposed what was happening in the DRC. It's worth a read. It's a little bit kind of laborious towards the end because it's the same thing over and over again, but he just goes around to all the different mines and tells the same stories over and over again.
It's an out of sight, out of mind phenomenon, right? Like this guy here. Okay. Yeah. All right. All I do, I go to the Apple Store. It comes in a nice, cool box, and the packaging is kind of cool. And do you know how much human suffering this phone actually represents?
Yeah,
right there. So I heard one story of a guy who worked for Apple, and he went over to one of the factories, and apparently, the casing part, the inside, I guess you call it the chassis part. I forget what metal, not titanium, something like that. But they dip it in an acid. There's an acid wash that they put it through, and he said he's taking a tour of the factory with the manager, and they get up on a catwalk and they walk over this big old vat of this acid. And he said, in America, OSHA would never allow this. Just on an open catwalk, walking over an open bin of this acid. So China, they have no respect for the environment or for the people's safety or for kids breathing in toxic material.
It's the hypocrisy of it, right? And if you scale that out to the cobalt mines, because cobalt, you'd be forgiven for thinking that somebody's digging a piece of cobalt out of the ground. That's not. Cobalt is in the conglomeration of a bunch of different other minerals that are there. And there's a process that they go through to process the cobalt, which involves sulfuric acid. So same thing, right? They dig these rocks out of the ground, and they're digging a piece of rock that is a conglomeration of stuff that's got other things in it. And then they hand it off and they sell it for just like $1. Yeah. And they offload like a like a sandbag full of this stuff. So they put a sandbag and they get on their motorbike and they ride into town and they hand it off to these dealers. And then the dealers hand it off to the Chinese buyers, and the Chinese buyers go and actually process it. And then that's how it gets created into batteries. But the processing happens there.
Yep.
And the reason it happens there is because it's such a dirty process. And in that part of the world, there's no rules. You know, even if they picked it up and took it all the way to China to process it there, there'd be rules there. You know, because they've got factories, they've got people. There's some version of work health and safety in China as well, but in the DRC, there's just not.
I mean, environmentalists, they should love oil and they should love natural gas.
Particularly natural gas, they should.
Yeah, especially natural gas, right? I mean, you have how many countries down in South America, you know, in the Amazon, where the rainforest is being decimated by people who are cutting down the trees for, you know, for firewood. Well, if they have natural gas, they wouldn't need to do that.
Have massive resources off the coast, and we have the same thing here. And you know, natural gas is the natural transition energy into green energy. Why you're building all of those wind farms and solar farms, and you're trying to do all of those things, that's awesome. You know, I encourage to do all of that, but don't do it by causing blackouts and brownouts and causing all sorts of grief in the economy. It's a crazy time.
And how about those nuclear reactors we could put online? Talk about your clean fuel.
Hey, you're definitely going to get us cancelled when you're talking sense like that, pal.
Okay,
you got to stop that immediately, right? That type of discussion. We have all the uranium in the world here in Australia as well, and you know we're anti. I'll close the loop on it, right? We're anti-vehement, anti-nuclear. No nuclear power here in Australia. Yeah, no worries, no nuclear power. Hey, we just signed a deal for nuclear submarines. Isn't that awesome?
Okay. We'll substitute that word with marshmallow from now on. It's marshmallow. Okay.
It's funny. All right, let's shift gears into the next story, which I think is actually really important. It says a lot about Tucker Carlson being offered $100 million by Patrick Bet-David. If you don't know who he is, he's a YouTuber. He's a kind of a media personality. He's got a lot of different things going on. He's got several different businesses, and he's a wealthy guy as well. And he put an offer on the table publicly because he thinks that it's important that there's transparency in deals like this. And you know, what does that mean to an average person like me or you, Ed? Well, I think that it's actually pretty important because there's a lot of people out there saying Tucker had 12 to 18 months, maybe as much as 2 years to run on his contract. And he's getting a little bit too lippy, and they had to clip his wings because he's too lippy. And the problem is that he's vehemently anti-war and he's vehemently anti-Democrat. And if he's going against the mainstream media and the mainstream narrative, he's got to go. So the reason that this is important is if there's a large deal on the table for someone like that that's so tempting, then what that means is we have that voice of reason. And there's a lot of talk about Rumble and Twitter coming together to actually put something together like that. And, you know, I think we might be seeing a little bit of a shift in what's actually happening in the media landscape. And Megyn Kelly did a really good job the other day. I should have found the clip, but I can kind of explain it. The day before Tucker had left, he had like 1.7 million views on his channel, on TV, that is. And then the next day it was like similar, it was 1.6 or something like that. Then there was the weekend, he was shit canned. And then at the same time slot on the Monday, it was like 900,000. And then all of a sudden the next day it had gone to like 400,000, 500,000. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, he put out that one single video on Twitter that goes for 2 minutes. And it's really like, hey, good evening, it's Tucker Carlson. It's just his normal evening monologue saying, and he's like, the conversations we have don't mean anything. The whole thing's meaningless. Doesn't mean anything. In 5 years' time, you won't even remember these stupid conversations that are causing all this problem. Trust me, I've been doing this for 20 years. You know, I know exactly what I'm talking about. But the guy goes on Twitter and gets 80 million views. Like, don't the people in mainstream media understand that the only people watching the TV shows are the ones that are, who are they? Who is the demographic? They must be an older demographic. Because if you're only getting 1.5 million views per episode of the biggest TV anchor in the world, and then he goes out and puts out one tweet and gets 80 million views, and then they can't, why would you do that? Like, it's almost like the Green New, there must be the same people with the Green New Deal. You're cutting off your nose to spite your face. Your whole company's going to implode because of it. It's like ridiculous, man.
Well, you're assuming that profits are important to those people. That's
You're assuming energy is important to those greenies as
Yeah,
well,
that's right.
or turning your
And that,
dishwasher on is important.
and that's kind of a big, and that's kind of a big assumption that you, because we talked about this last week. Remember the segment I did where I showed the meme of Darth Vader taking on, being killing Obi-Wan Kenobi.
And there it is. It came out like
I,
literally a day later.
Right. I predicted that day. This was the day after he began. I predicted he's going to be more powerful than ever, and the powers to be just made him more powerful. They made him a martyr, and he was on the Fox platform. I mean, if they're interested in profits, he was their number one guy. If they're profit driven, you don't get rid of your number one guy. That's not sound business practice.
And that's why I say he's vehemently anti-war.
Yeah.
Well, he's not anti-war. He's just, all he's doing is speaking his truth.
Yeah.
He's saying Zelensky comes to your Congress and addresses people in a freaking jumper. Yeah. And then comes in there and has the nerve to ask for more money and then
demand more money. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And just the way that he behaves is just like not in line with the way that American politicians behave. And he's just calling him out on it. And people don't like that he's going against the mainstream narrative. So maybe there's something else at play here. It's not a conspiracy theory or anything like that, but it's just a question. And you've got to ask yourself when you see these things happening, like, why would someone like Patrick Bet-David offer him $100 million?
No,
why would they do that?
Yeah, I know why. We'll get to that.
Let's cover that. What do you got?
I want to close the loop on this one point, though. Remember, we've talked before how CNN and MSNBC, these other channels with this god awful ratings, where the Cartoon Network on a regular basis beats their ratings.
And more children watch TV than watch
news. But yet they don't let down on their messaging. Their messaging is exactly the same all the time.
It's crazy,
you would think that if they wanted to improve their ratings, they would change their messaging. But nope. So for them, it's a function of ideology. These outfits, these news outfits, these are just branches of larger corporations.
That's the only thing it could be, right? I think you're bang on there. It can only be the ideology. And so, sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
they're a function of a bigger thing.
Yeah, well, yeah. So they consider these news operations as a lost leader for them, and it's just a mouthpiece way of getting out, their agendas and their philosophies. So they don't care if they're losing money on it, because that's not the point of that. The point of that, I'm sure, if I thought about it, I could think of a consumer. I'm sure there are products out there, companies out there who have a product that's actually a lost leader, but it gets them out. It expands their market. It's kind of like a pathfinder.
There's other things they sell. Yeah.
Right. So for them, these are woke people, and I've noticed, because I am a big Fox follower, and I have been for years, because they were the only source on available, at least in mainstream media, to cover any kind of traditional point of view on subject matter. But at the same time, they offered the other side as well. So it was a good, well-balanced channel. But that has changed over just the past few years. It has become more woke. And right now, and I was down to Tucker. Tucker,
that was it.
Yeah, Tucker is one on one. So I'm one of those people who the next day, the next day, I watched 5 minutes of The Replacement. It was Kildarn, whatever the name. And 5 minutes in, 2 minutes in, that's it. And I haven't watched it since. So they lost me. So I can speak for that. And the only one I was watching was Tucker. A good indication of that was, their 5 o'clock slot where the Bret Baier show, and he does, which is the hard news, segment. They never, ever used any of Tucker's clips right. And he recently interviewed like Elon Musk. He had just finished a 3-part series interview with Elon Musk. That was a real get. That was a real score for him. They didn't, and they covered a lot of really good material. But on the Bret Baier, they didn't cover any of that material. Because Tucker has brought to light. When Tucker did a week-long expose on the January 6th Commission and how they were not showing footage how they were manipulating footage, and Tucker broke it open. He said, see, they lied to you. They only showed you this, but if you look at more, it shows you this is the actual things that happened. They didn't cover any of that in the Bret Baier Hour. So you can tell that inside there was a philosophical disagreement.
It's compartmentalized is your way to describe that. They're not cross-pollinating their news anchors and their stories and stuff.
So let's get on to the $100 million deal, because that's...
Before you go there, I just want to sum it up. I think I can sum it up in one word, yeah? How would you sum it up in one word?
Boy, I'm not quite sure what you're referring to. I don't know. You got me.
So I thought of this the day before, when I was driving to the gym in the morning after finishing the show with you, driving to the gym, and I saw there was 2 bus stops. They're probably, 400 meters apart. One bus stop has the Channel 9 logo. So imagine the bus stop, it's like as big as a person, like one side, and the ad there, and it's facing inwards, not the outward side of it, the inward side where the people sit in the bus stop. And it's got the Channel 9 logo. So here in Australia, you've got CNN, MSNBC, you've got Fox. We've got 9, 10, 7, and ABC and SBS. We've got really 5 channels, same sort of thing, right? So Channel 9 logo. And then I drive along another 400 meters later, same thing, Channel 9 logo. And I thought to myself, in one word, I can sum that up. You are irrelevant. Your delivery, your programming, everything to do with National 9 News and with Channel 9 is now actually irrelevant. And now everything to do with Fox is irrelevant.
Yep, I agree.
That's because you can get all of that elsewhere, and you can get it from people who don't have an axe to grind or an agenda to perpetuate.
Yep.
And that's why podcasting is so popular. That's why audiobooks are so popular. If I could read 100 books a year, I'd sit there and read them, but I can't read that many books. I don't have the time, but I can listen to them. That's why they're popular. And that's why podcasting is so popular, is just a couple of people having a conversation. Just those 2 normal guys are just chatting about that stuff that I want to chat about as well. And I'm just a fly on the wall there, and I don't have a narrative. And mainstream media, more and more, is irrelevant. And I saw as I was looking for some stories this morning, I saw a thing about ChatGPT, and I saw this thing yesterday that showed how it was in LinkedIn. I was trying to find it for this, but I couldn't find it, but it highlights what I'm talking about. So it said, watch how ChatGPT destroys this company in 3 days. I'm like, what? And it's a stock chart, and it's tracking along, and it goes like this. And I can't remember the exact name of the company. That's why I couldn't find it, because I kind of just like scrolling through my feed. And the company was a homework-based company where you would subscribe to them and they would do tutoring and they would help your kids, but then they would also supply textbooks and everything like that. And ChatGPT rendered them irrelevant.
Yep.
And then as I was looking for that article, I was typing those keywords: ChatGPT making business irrelevant, homework company, blah, blah, blah. I was trying to Google it, right? Trying to find it. And I couldn't find it. But then as I'm typing ChatGPT irrelevant, those keywords, it brings up these results in Google saying ChatGPT will make Google irrelevant in 2 years. And I'm thinking, whoever thought, if you could rewind the clock, and I'll close with this thought: if you could rewind the clock 30 years, not that long ago, just a couple of decades ago, when your kids were still at home with you, and you're just living a normal life, and you're watching TV before the internet, before all of that stuff. If I could be a time traveler and insert myself into your life there and go, hey man, I'm from 30 years in the future, do you know that none of this will be relevant in 30 years? You'd go, what? Fox? CNN? What are you talking about? No, none of it will be relevant. It won't actually exist in 30 years. You go, what? And I can tell you that in 3 to 5 years, life as you know it on the internet won't exist. YouTube probably won't exist in the current form that it's in. Rumble and Twitter may take over completely, because there's no censorship there, and the people that own these companies don't care about censorship. They don't have an axe to grind. They don't have any of that stuff. And the relevance of those things will escalate, and the irrelevance of the mainstream and the norm that's been there forever will just completely fade into obscurity. It's an interesting time.
Yeah, same bat time, same bat channel. When I was a kid, and this kind of illustrates your point. So when I was a kid, the original Batman series, the really campy one, and of course when you're a kid, you take it seriously. You take it up, and they would have these cliffhanger episodes where
They did.
And then the cliffhanger said, "Will Batman get out of this one? Tune in tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel." And of course, you made sure you got home from school. You'd run home from school because it came out at 3:30. You get home and you'd run home. You want to make sure you caught that episode. Well, it was now that's like irrelevant, right? Because
I could just go over to Ripples in Time and watch Batman.
There you
go.
I want. there you go. So irrelevant. All right, so let's talk about the $100 million. The $100 million.
So why did Patrick Bet-David offer him that? What do you think?
Well, two reasons. First of all, I think it's kind of clickbait. I think it makes for a really good. It's gonna make him more popular.
He's trying to pounce on the opportunity, right? So he's capitalizing on that.
That's secondary. First of all, he's going to be known as the guy who stepped up to look out for Tucker, right? So, and I'm sure he crunched the numbers that if Tucker actually took the offer, it'll still work out. But sat down, it'll still work out. But if it doesn't work out, I'm still going to get credit for being the guy who defended.
It's all upside.
So for me, it doesn't cost me. He's probably half hoping that Tucker doesn't take the deal because this is a real cheap way for him to get credit for being a cheerleader for Tucker. Because Tucker, for his audience, Tucker is right there, right? There's a mind meld going on between those two. So his audience are the same type. So he is now looked upon as like a little hero for his conservative crowd. And all he had to do is say, "Yeah, I'm going to make an offer for $100 million," and kind of hoping he doesn't take it. But if Tucker does take it, I'm sure he is worth that much money. I'm sure, absolutely. And he offered to put him on the board of his company and all the rest of it. He pretty much gave Tucker a blank check. Whatever you want, man. I really want you. Now
let's just back up for a sec here, Ed, because the world is upside down, man. Yeah, the world is upside down. So Tucker is known to be getting about $1.5 million a month working at Fox. And so let's just back up. 20 years ago, he said, "I'm not going to lie anymore. I had a drug problem. I had an alcohol problem. I've been sober for 20 years, and I've just decided I'm going to tell the truth. And when I'm wrong, I'll come out and say that I'm wrong. I'm going to just tell the truth." Yet what we see is the opposite of all of that in virtually every other media source that's out there. We see the opposite of that. They lie to us continuously. The politicians lie, the media lies, and the lies are completely perpetuated. And those people are rewarded. Yep. Like what?
Yeah.
What? The world is upside down. So now we're writing the world the right way. This is like so the reason I think that this deal is so important and this conversation is important is because it's an inflection time in our society and in our cultures where you'll be rewarded for telling the truth. You'll be rewarded for having an opinion and standing your ground. And you'll also be rewarded when you put your hand up and say, "Hey, I think I might have been wrong about that. Let me correct that. Let me correct the record there and fix my opinion with the benefit of new knowledge and new information." So you're being rewarded for all of those things. Whereas if you rewind the clock and look back into history of the last 20 or 30 years, the people that have done the opposite have been promoted and perpetuated, and they're the liars and the cheats. The world was upside down. But ultimately, if we can shift into this new paradigm with Elon Musk and Twitter, and that does become the one go-to platform for everything, for video, for truth, for posting, for communicating and DMing and all of that stuff, which it pretty much already is. If that can actually be combined with something like Rumble to get more out there and to get bigger and wider audiences, the platforms like YouTube will become less relevant, or they'll become the platforms of learning, because YouTube's the biggest university in the world, right? You can learn how to do anything on YouTube. But if you want to speak truth on YouTube, you'll be shit canned and be cancelled. And the world is upside down. It's inverted, man. It's like, and when you look at, when my brother asked me, I think I've mentioned this to you before, he asked me once, we were talking about the evil satanic politicians. And he said to me, "Do you even know what satanic means? Like what that Satanism means?" And I said, "Well, no, I don't know, worshiping the devil or some religious connotation. What are you talking about?" And he said, no, it's the inversion of everything. Everything is inverted, and everything has been inverted. When you think of what happened in COVID, all the lies they told us, so many lies, they lied to us about everything. And remember, there was a sticker on the ground in the supermarket, and you thought that that was going to keep you safe because a politician told you that. Like they just lied to us about absolutely everything. The world is inverted, and they're evil, satanic people that are running this society. And we had a God-bothering shirt lifter as the prime minister here in Australia, singing at his church and doing all of these things, but perpetuating satanic rituals on Australian society. Maybe a little bit too much for some people, but that's the truth. And that's the unspoken truth of it all, because he lied and continued to lie and perpetuated the lie, which is a satanic trait, because it's the inversion of everything, but it's been righted now by the truth. And that's why I think this is so important for Tucker. I think you're quite right with Patrick Bet-David and what he was saying about, capitalizing on the opportunity, and maybe he doesn't take it. Maybe that won't be a bad thing, but we get all the upside as well.
No, that's right. No, Tucker's going to be back in a really big way. I mean, regarding Tucker's situation itself, listen, I have to believe that financially he's doing okay.
He's fine.
And he's in a position where he can pursue exactly what he wants to pursue. He doesn't need the money. He's more interested in whether or not he will have the freedom to do what he wants to say what he wants to say. Whatever platform he chooses, that platform is going to explode. It's just going to, because of supply and demand. There are very few people supplying what he supplies. There's very few. He has very little competition. I mean, right? In that space, how many people do we have of his caliber in the conservative traditional value space? Right?
Well, I think I maybe disagree. I'll push back on that a little bit. I think there's lots of people out there of that caliber and of that skill, but there's almost nobody willing to do what he's willing to do, because you have to roll the dice and take a risk. And most people are not risk takers. Most people are very I'm worried about my self-preservation. I'm worried about my reputation, my money, my life. I think there's plenty of talented people out there, but not a lot of people willing to actually take the leap and join the dots between those two things.
I mean, I think that for him, I think he's on a mission, so to speak, to defend conservative values. And it just so happened that he put in the time, he put in the work, he put in the effort. I mean, he built his following the old-fashioned way. He earned it, right? And if you ever watch his shows, I mean, his monologues would sometimes go on for like 20 minutes. And I kept thinking, where the hell did you find time? And I'm sure people were helping him and stuff, but they're always very well put together, well written.
Have you heard the story of how he does it?
No.
So he's a writer by trade, yeah. So and he would so he's the reason that he was on at nighttime is because it would take him all day to create the monologue, and he would some of the stories about it. He would go in the corner and meditate in the corner about the thing, and then come out and do that. And he's known for not watching TV or plugging into social media either. So he hears the stories of the day from his staff and the people around him, but he's creating that monologue just in his mind as well. And maybe there's some help there as well and whatnot. But Ed, I've seen you ramble on for 20 or 30 minutes on a YouTube video all by yourself and not take a breath. And I'm wondering what's going on there as well. And that's what I mean. There's plenty of talented people out there, but there's very few that, it's the talented person can hit the target, right? I heard this yesterday in an audiobook. The talented person can hit the target. Plenty of people that can hit the target, but it's the genius that can hit the target you can't see. And I think maybe he's the equivalent of a modern day genius in journalism and mainstream media and whatnot as well.
Yeah. No, he's I predict he's going to be a force. He's going to be a whole media empire is going to be built around him. And he'll be at the center of it, and he'll be guiding it. It's going to be an interesting thing to watch. It'll be interesting, and I'm sure he's probably going to take his time to meditate on it and put together exactly the platform that he wants and get the team around him that he wants. I'm sure he can get anyone he wants to be on his team, right?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
So he could single-handedly change the face of modern media. He could be the Google of evening news.
Yeah, maybe Elon Musk is talking to him, bringing him across to Twitter and something like that going on, because that was a recent interview, right?
Yeah.
And think if you were Elon Musk, the first thing you'd do is probably reach out to the guy and say hey to him and make sure he was okay. Just check in with him.
Maybe he'll be, hey man, I'll set you up on Mars. You can broadcast from Mars.
You can be the propaganda piece on Mars.
Yeah.
All right, let's shift gears to the last part of the show. What have you got, mate? You've got the next bank to fail. Who do you think it's going to be? Have you got something for us?
I certainly do. Okay, so as you all know, we've had a pretty rough time in the banking industry around in certain banks. And did I manage to get it? No, it didn't load. That's right. I'm going to do a screen share. All right, so I'm going to give you my prediction for the next bank to fail. And here we go. I'll just jump right into it. All right. Can you see that, Rob? Can you? All right. So here we go. PacWest Bancorp. Yesterday it was down over 20%, about 28%. Having a little. Let me refresh it because the market is closed now. Let's see how it ended on the day. Oh, down another 13. Oh, look at that. And seeing the aftermarket here, it's down another $1.72. It's down to $4.70. Holy cow.
Now it's high of nearly $30.
Yeah. And so let's go back 3 months and let's take a look. Okay. And now
look at that gap.
Look at this. Yep. There you go. Now, so this stock was around $28 back in mid-March. And by the way, I wonder what event this represented. I wonder what that could be. So
what's the date?
Well, March. What is it? March. It looks like March 15-ish. Anyway, this was the SVB calamity.
Yeah.
Right? All right. So it went down and simply now, and then it settled into this nice long channel. Now, I won't get into technical analysis about this, but this is a slam dunk short.
The double bottom there.
Yeah. Well, you had a nice long narrow channel there, broke below the channel, and then puke. Boom. Now channels. Okay, I didn't mean to do this, but as long as we're on the topic, from a technical analysis point of view, channels are very powerful, and the rule is the longer the channel and the narrower the channel, the bigger the move will be when it does finally break the channel. Now, in this case, it broke to the downside, right? Because what channels represent is kind of a staring contest between the buyers and the sellers. And you had a big move down, and then it settled into a staring contest. Now, as the channel goes on, the odds are that when this channel breaks, it's going to break to the downside. Why? Because the move leading into the channel was to the downside. That's just
hang on. There's no reason for it to break to the upside. You're overcomplicating it. It's not going back up to $28, man.
I was making. You
were being technical, to the downside, then down again.
I was just giving you a little lesson on technical analysis. Now this company. While I'm here, I'm going to come back to this in a second, but let's look at a few other bank stocks while we're here. See, what else can we look at? Let's look at Wells Fargo. How's that looking? You'll be impressed how I know all these symbols off the top of my head because I've been doing this so long. Okay, Wells Fargo also looking like crap, and it's rolling over. Now, what's another one? Let's look at Bank of America. Nope, what did it be? Oh, what's about that guy? Well, let's take a look at JP Morgan. Here it is.
Look at the gap up there as well.
Yeah. Now this is you see, JP Morgan is unique because it is considered a beneficiary to other banks' failures, right? But remember the big move this day here. This is on the news that they got that sweetheart deal from the First Republic, and look, they're giving it all back, and they're right down. This is not a good sign, guys. And
that's
you have
the sugar high there that you were talking about, right?
There you go. And look at this gap here. You know the rule about gaps there, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's going to be covered on the downside on the way back down. Yeah.
Now, if you think of JP Morgan as the strongest, as the bellwether in the group, and it's considered the strongest representation of the group, and it's looking like that, imagine what the weak stocks are going to do. So,
Yeah.
this is not a good sign for the banking industry. And as the banking industry goes, so does the market. By the way, let's look at.
So when you look at the original chart there, you're saying PacWest is the next one to go, or
Yeah.
it potentially could be. The setup is there for that to almost go away, or certainly to be decimated. When we look at something like that, do you see an opportunity to get yourself short in those trades?
Oh, okay. Good question. Let me cover this guy real quick, and then I'll answer that question. Here's another bank, U.S. Bank. This is actually my bank, U.S. Bank Corp. And again, yeah, the channel.
And it's
So
broken to
off
the
a little bit,
downside
and it's
again.
going
Same thing.
and it's heading down too. So and
If you overlaid that PacWest one and that one and maybe half a dozen others, they'll all be doing the same behavior, isn't it?
That's right. And that's kind of my point. Now, if you look at an ETF of the banking industry. Now, this is the FAS. All right. So this
It's almost
is
the same thing.
There you go. There you go. Right. The pattern's looking the same. And if you wanted to make money on the sell-off of these guys, one way to do it is this guy, FAZ, which is you know that I did options on these back here, right? I told you about that, how I did call options on this guy. So this is the inverse, right? This chart. So this ETF is a short ETF it's a bear ETF on the banking industry. So as the banks go down, this guy goes up. So if you want an easy way to make money off of the banks selling off, you guys can just buy this guy if you want. I'm not telling you to do it, not financial advice, just one friend to
You're
another.
just saying.
Just sharing an idea. Yeah.
Saying that's what I did.
Yeah. And okay, so let's go back to PacWest. Okay, so. Well, my point on this, no, I wouldn't be shorting this guy now because it's too late to short it. I mean,
What about some put options?
Yeah, there you go. I do put options on the guy, but the thing, well, I don't know though. The time to do options on this guy was back here, because as soon as it breaks, the premium on those options are going to pop.
And you're not yet don't have much downside to move to. We've
Right.
gone all the way down to $5.50 or $6, whatever it is there.
Yeah.
And then there's not much. Well, $6.40. Yeah. There's not much room to go. If we were up at $25 and it broke to the downside, then yeah, sure.
Yeah, the time to short it or do put options on it was back here, and there were signs there to sell, because
if
you go back six months, yeah, that was now the real trigger is really this guy here. But if you look closely in here, they put in a descending triangle, right? It went up, came down, had a little rally. Now, so the real trigger is right there. So if someone were paying attention, you did have time to short this guy or do put options.
And look at that in just 3 days. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Just that you said it yesterday on the show that this stuff happens really quickly, and it happens almost so fast you don't know what to do. Because if you look at the crash there that happened in 3 big candlesticks like that over 3 days, the first day you'd go, "What's happening with the bank? What do you mean I should get my money out of the bank?" Then you go to the bank and say, "Can I have my $400,000?" And they go, "No, you can't. You can't have your money." And I try and transfer my money and they go, no, you can't transfer your money either. And now you're stuck. And that's, to your point, that's why you've got to follow that mantra. You've got to reduce. You don't have to get your money out of the bank. You've just got to reduce your exposure to the bank. And that can be a variety of different ways. That could be spreading your money around across a number of different banks so you're not actually exposed to one. Because if you had $500,000 in that bank account there and the price pulled away like that, man, you'd be nervous, huh?
Yeah. Now all these bank stocks are looking the same. The patterns are, you can overlay them and they all look the same. So why do I think this one is going to be the next one? This one has particular exposure to the commercial real estate industry. And we've talked about this before, how I think one of the biggest untold stories about this banking crisis is the real underlying problem. One of the biggest underlying issues is commercial real estate. And
well, hang on. I'll just qualify that a bit more and say the biggest underlying issue is vacant offices and their leases now being expired after COVID. I'm not renewing that lease. I'm not going back. My workforce is now dispensed. I'm not carrying that overhead anymore. Go into the city right now here in Sydney, and you'd be forgiven for thinking like something was wrong.
Yeah.
Like it's a bit busy, but then you kind of walk around and go, like if I walk around today on a Thursday in downtown Sydney, I'd be like, there's no people here. Where is everybody? Like, what's going on? And it's not that there's no people; they're just all working from home.
Yeah. You know, Minnesota happens to be headquarters to a lot of Fortune 500 companies. We have 3M, we have Medtronic, we have Hormel, we have a lot, and we have Target, we have General Motors and General Mills. You know, if you like to eat cereal out there. But if you go to any one of the corporate offices, they are empty now. They're the people are working from home. People, the manager said, you know what, we can save money, but we'll just have people work at home. We didn't, and I think that's going to be a new trend. It's here with us. So we have a glut now out there of vacant, you know, commercial real estate buildings, and this is real. That's a real issue. A lot of these banks now. So this bank, PacWest, happens to cater to commercial real estate developers. So they have a lot of this paper on their books. That's why I think they're particularly exposed to what's going on in the banking industry right now. And but like we said before, all these companies, they report their financials quarterly, right? So every quarter is when we get a chance to see what's actually going on. Well, we just finished one quarter. So this fall is we're going to get a next good look at these banks' financials, and I think that's probably when the real big event is going to happen, and we're going to see probably hundreds of banks going under. Hundreds.
Man. You heard it first here, folks, on the unspoken truth that this banking system is definitely coming undone. Those charts are reflective of that. So remember, here's the mantra. Here it comes. Reduce your exposure to the bank, buy some gold and silver, and create some passive recurring income. If you can use big tech to create some passive recurring income, that's a way to do that as well. I help people in another little program that I run called the Recurring Income Lab to help people to do that, using YouTube as your marketing tool and communities, building out communities to help you to do that. That's the fastest way to monetize your knowledge. You don't have to sell products or services or courses or anything like that. You're just monetizing your knowledge. So got a good system in place that works incredibly well for me. I've got lots of clients that I do that with, and that's called the Recurring Income Lab. So if you want to know some more about that, happy to share some more. I'll put some links in the description there. Ed, thanks so much for today, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always, to share this with you. There's no one else in the world I'd rather be doing this with. It's a huge amount of fun. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to follow us on Spotify. Come on over to Telegram. You can see all the propaganda. I'll put some more propaganda in there as well, and I'll see if you can spot it. We'll play Spot the Propaganda in the Telegram channel, and we'll see if you can figure out what's wrong with those videos and what's true and what's not. That might be actually a really good idea. You know, you see these other YouTube channels out there like Clown World, and you know, maybe there's one about lying politicians that we could put in, but then I'd have to sit and watch and listen to politicians all day long. I'd sooner jump off a cliff than do something like that. But here we are. Anyway, folks, come on over, join us on Telegram, follow us on Twitter, and come on over to Rumble as well. Ed, any closing remarks, mate?
Just please hit that like button. And if there are any topics out there you guys would like us to cover that we're not, please put it in the comment section. Give us a comment anyway, because it helps the algo, and we would love to hear from you.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow, Ed, and we'll see you tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, as well. Bye for now.